And thank you very much for stopping by and for returning to the old world. So the last couple of boxes of infantry I needed to get the core of my fantasy dwarf army done have arrived. Now, I've previously done some work with the regular infantry and heavy infantry, but now it's the time for the lights. And as I've not looked at them before, I thought, let's do a look at what's in the box. So we're looking today at the dwarf light infantry. You get 30 multi-part hard plastic figures in this box, and they are part of the Oathmark range by Northstar Miniatures in association with Osprey Games. So these are models designed for the Oathmark game. Intro aside, let's have a look at what's in the box. So as with the heavy and regular infantry box sets, you get 6 identical sprues, each with 5 figures on them. You see the range of bodies. They're looking quite dynamic, which is nice, and there's a reasonable amount of detail on those bodies as well. Moving down the sprue, we can see that they are designed to be armed either with double-handed weapons or bows. The idea, according to the box, is that they're either militia, so the double-handed weapons, or you sort of border guard ranger types armed with bows and arrows. Now, appreciate that for the Warhammer fans out there, a bow armed dwarf is not something you're particularly going to find useful. Personally, I'm intending to use them as counts as for crossbows. A dwarf being quite strong would be able to get a good pull off a composite bow, so I'm just going to imagine that's what they are. Big range of heads on the sprue, coming back to the point in hand. Quite a wide array of different hats, which is nice. Now, I mentioned in the video on the regular infantry that I didn't enjoy so much the fact that that box set had a lot of heads in sort of soft hats rather than helmets. I think hats are more fitting for this one, because if you look back at the torsos, they're not heavily armoured. And I think I commented at the time in my previous video that if you can afford body protection, you'd also have something on your head, because the head's so important and how hard it is to survive a hit there. So some of these heads do have helmets, but not all. But as I say, I think in the way these models are configured, that not having a helmet is absolutely fine. There are some single-handed weapons on this sprue as well, so they can either be paired up with a bow to make a champion type figure, or with a little bit of effort, you can easily make a sword and board type unit as well. So quite a diverse set, particularly when you start adding in your spare parts from the regular and heavy infantry, if you've got the sprues for those. Talking of command figures, there's also a small section on the sprue for command. So you've got a banner pole and some bits for a champion. As always with this range, there aren't any options for a musician, which is a little bit of a shame. I would have liked to have seen those, but overall, not an awful sprue. I should also point out that along with the 6 sprues, you also get 30 of these Rendara bases. They are 25mm square for those people who are thinking about whether it's going to be a 20mm Warhammer game or a 25mm base Warhammer game. So these figures are designed to go on 25mm bases. However, I've based mine at 20mm, as always using the 20mm squares from Green Stuff World. So here we see a couple of the models made and based up. As suspected, I think there's quite enough detail on here to make them interesting to paint. Not too much detail that they're going to be a real hassle. That's something that I found across the rest of the range as well. Price-wise, these figures come in, RRP, I think they're about £25. I've got them cheaper than that because I went through an online retailer. So I think mine came in at less than 80p a model, which I think is really good value for one of these sets. Certainly compared against what you'd expect to pay from a Games Workshop, for example. The one thing I would say about these models, which I didn't enjoy so much, and it's something that I didn't notice as much with the other sets in the range, is the mould lines. Now, there's been fairly chunky mould lines across all of the box sets, but because of, I think, the lack of armour on these, there's less for those mould lines to disappear naturally into. So what you tend to find is you've got to really go to town in getting rid of them. Unfortunately, these mould lines often go across pieces of detail on the models, meaning that they are tricky to deal with without wrecking the underlying detail. So we've got, and to be honest, despite 2 or 3 passes over these, I can still see bits of mould line on these models. It tends to be tucked into the wrist. You've got things across fingers, and crooks of elbows, which are really hard to get to. So it does look like when putting these models together and putting them on the sprue, there's not really been that much consideration for where the sprue, where the mould lines are going to go. Some really good kits by the manufacturers do seem to take this into account, so it's a lot easier to deal with the mould lines. And in some cases, you don't even have to deal with them at all. So finally, the question, how do they rank up with other ranges? Well, here you see the 2 models I've put together. On the far right is an old Games Workshop Dwarf. Then you've got one of the 7th edition miners, and then far left is one of the regular infantry from the Oathmark range. So you'll see they're a little bit thinner and a little bit taller than the Games Workshop Dwarves, but I don't think they look hugely out of place. Now, would I want Games Workshop models standing side by side with an Oathmark model? Then no, I wouldn't. But I think if you had a unit just off to the side, then it wouldn't be quite so bad, and they'd work okay in the same army. I did mention that these models are designed for 25mm square bases. As you can see, they're ranking up pretty nicely on the 20mm, so not a concern there, and they'd be easy to convert to 25mm because the thin Rendara bases, you could just pop one of these on top of that thin base without, and then just texture it up a little bit so that it blends in. So whichever way Games Workshop go on that, I don't think it's going to be problematic. So that concludes really my review of the Dwarf Light Infantry. Overall, I think they're really good value for money. I know some people have problems with the shoulders on these, and they've commented that they don't like the little flaps, but I don't really see a massive issue with that myself. Looking across the entire range of Dwarf Infantry, I've looked at all 3 of the plastic box sets now, and I think they all seem to offer really good value for money. They've got good models, they're enjoyable to paint, they're not too difficult to put together at all. So they're all really good positive things. All like musicians, which is a shame. So if you want musicians, you need to either 3D print or obtain bits from other sets in order to get there. Now, if I were to start another fantasy army, and let's face it, I may well do, I do think that I would be looking at the Oathmark range as one of my go-to ranges, at least initially, to check out whether I like the aesthetic of the models, whether it fitted in with the plan I had for that particular army. because yeah, they're nice models, easy to paint, and offer really good value. So definitely a range I'll be looking at in the future. Should I do a non-human fantasy army? Say non-human purely because obviously there's such a wide range of historicals out there which also offer great value. So that's it from me and my comments, as I say, on the Dwarf Light Infantry box set and how it fits into the range as a whole. I hope you found this useful. If so, do consider dropping a like and subscribe. All helps the channel. This is Return to the Old World. Have a great day.